The Talk Station presents Faith Matters, a look at contemporary stories and issues from a faith perspective. While this is a pre-recorded show, we are interested in your ideas, comments, and questions, and we urge you to email them to faithmatters@thetalkstation.com.
Give me faith, trust what you say, that you're good and your love is great. I'm broken inside, I give you my life.
And now on the Talk Station, Faith Matters.
And welcome to Faith Matters here on the Talk Station, FM 107 and AM 1240, and I'm Ben Ball, and joined today with Reverend Robert Cornegate from Chapel by the Sea, Associate Pastor there, and welcome back to Mark Woods, too, who hasn't been with us for a long time, from Cherry Point United Methodist Church. And good morning, Mark, welcome back.
It's good to be back, Ben.
And didn't mean to skip you there, Robert, but good morning.
It's okay, Ben. I'm used to it.
You've been with me forever. All that I have is yours.
That's all right. I live to serve you, Ben.
And we have also a special guest here today. Robert, let me let you introduce him, because you brought him into our fold here this
I
morning.
don't know this guy. David. This is David Wilkinson. David is in town from Chicago. He's going to be our speaker. This is recorded on Thursdays, folks. So we're recording before an event tonight, which is the Coastal Pregnancy Care Center's annual fundraising event. David's going to be our keynote speaker. He's going to be with us, been with us for like forever.
Yeah.
The last couple of days. And we've been showing him the town and having a great time. Went to the Sanitary
That's right.
Restaurant and Fish Market last
night.
And
saw John Tunnel, which is he was a fixture there too, by the way.
Exactly.
I'll
So
shout out.
He's come in for this, and we're really excited about him being here, and he agreed to come into the show this morning.
David is a CEO of the Global Equipping Center, and what does that do, David?
Okay, we provide executive coaching to companies under $1 million. They're looking to double their revenue in a year. Mm-hmm. So we double between 3 and 7 companies globally every year. And then we provide some business consulting to larger companies, do some corporate training. And what most excites me about our company is not just that we're based here in the U.S. in Chicago, but we're also based in South Africa. So I travel there every quarter and get to speak to hundreds and thousands of business people on that side as well.
And you have been able to interface business and your ministry too, right?
Yes. We go in on the business front. We don't talk about anything spiritually or God-related. And then what typically happens is people start to see astounding results in their business, and eventually they kind of bump into God by themselves, and they said, now, wait a second, this is a little bit too good. What else is going on here? And we say, well, we don't want to really tell you. You don't really want to know. And they said, no, we want to know. And we said, well, we have an invisible business partner, and his name is God. Mm-hmm. And we've been praying for you that your company would explode. And then they bump into God. It's quite astounding when God actually moves in a miraculous way in business, in a secular way, where people know that it's actually not in a natural way, and they have to find out what the answer is.
And once again, as Robert said, we're recording this before the event tonight, but the event tonight is the annual fundraising event for the Coastal Pregnancy Care Center, and you have a heart for this ministry that you were telling me kind of developed from a paper that you wrote. I mean, that you recalling this paper that you wrote?
Yeah, I forgot about this paper until about a year and a half ago. When I was first invited to speak with the Exponential Group to these different pregnancy organizations around the U.S., and I was asking the Lord to just give me some confirmations that I was supposed to do this. And the first thing He reminded me was a 44-page term paper when I was in 8th grade that I did on abortion that left a deep impact on me.
I'm not sure I read 44 pages when I was in 8th grade, but I wrote them.
And it was astounding, but I had forgotten about it all these years, and that was the first reminder that I was supposed to raise funds for this. And the second one was when I was about 12 years old. We have a family friend. Their daughter got pregnant and had nowhere to go, and my family opened up their home and said, you can come until you birth your baby. And so we saw God move in her life in special ways, providing for her. So just to see those experiences young on as a child growing up actually left an imprint on me. So when it was time to raise funds for them, I had a heart for what they were doing.
Robert, this Coastal Pregnancy Care Center has been around now. This is the 30th anniversary.
That's exactly right.
You've
3
been,
decades.
You've been involved since its inception, haven't
Yeah,
you?
from the beginning. I was on the steering committee when we were putting this together, and then was the chairman of the board, the first board that was organized. And of course, I came and went a number of years with mercy ships and other things in mission. So, but I've been. It's a ministry that God kind of planted in my heart early on, and have been real active in it. I'm back on the board, and so it's a real privilege to be a part of this ministry and the impact it's having. One of the things we were talking about this morning, what would this county be like without the pregnancy center? And going through some of the impact that this ministry has had. And it's phenomenal, the thousands of people that have been touched and how it's expanded. God asks us sometimes to do things we really don't think we can do. And this was one of them. And it began with reaching women with unplanned pregnancies, and it's expanded from that into a lot of different programs. And probably the keynote one right now is our lifeguard program, which is teaching health and character development, abstinence in the public school systems. And it's just a very exciting time to be a part of. So hopefully all of you went to the.
Yes. Well,
this will be playing Sunday morning. So.
But we're going to say that the need is ongoing.
Exactly.
And for example, this pregnancy care center has been a model for others in the lifeguard program, but also helped to start in Onslow.
That's
got
right.
going. I know
We had one in Havelock for quite a while.
Yeah, and there is one in Havelock now, and again, right in your backyard, Mark. And it is, and these pregnancy centers, as you've seen, David, around the country, all face similar challenges, and it's not about the politics of abortion as it is about the challenges that are faced. Now, sometimes that obviously gets intertwined with it, but one of those challenges is just having the funds to be able to bring it about.
Yes.
Right?
The passion that the executive directors and the boards have is about saving babies from being aborted. That's typically why they start. It moves into more of a holistic perspective, which focuses not just on the babies, but eventually focuses on the mother, about helping her make the decision about carrying her baby to full term, possibly to take care of it or to adopt it. And then eventually it adds the man in as well, and to help him to thrive as well through this situation. And what you don't find is people getting involved in this pregnancy resource centers because they want to raise funds. That's not why they got in this.
That's right.
So what you have is people with a passion who have no business background and no fundraising experience, but yet they're supposed to lead a fundraising organization.
Yeah, right.
So
Yeah.
all of a sudden they find out that they're spending, like some I've met with, they're spending 50 to 80% of their time raising funds to support their center, and their passion isn't to raise funds, is to be a part of the community. And that's where we come in, and hopefully to kind of shift that away from let's raise a lot of money in one evening, so you don't have to focus the rest of your year on fundraising, but on meeting the needs of the community.
But and again, part of that I know has been for this center has been to raise up champions who will contribute every month.
Yeah, we have a program, the Champions Program, which is sort of what our regular donors, that cash flow donor, if you want to put it that way. But that
It's
person
it's maintenance funding.
that's giving on a regular basis and gives us the working capital that we need to be able to do the programs. We're expanding a new program now. I mean, it's a program that's been around for 5 years, but we're making a major push in it, and it is towards this more holistic approach, not just the babies, not just the mothers, but the fathers as well. So we have a program called 24/7 Dads, and so we're doing character development, one-on-one counseling and relationship on helping these men discover what it means to be a man and to be a father, how to be a part of that family, how to protect, and to change them, kind of that from that predatory to the protector side of it. And it's really been a real exciting thing to take place. And with the way the culture's going, this becomes a very powerful influence in a community. So
I mean, it has been.
Yeah,
it has been.
And a lot of the girls, a lot of the guys that are involved in it aren't going to go to their churches. We were just talking about that. They're not going to go out and get counseling. This is a great, safe place where they can go with a great deal of confidentiality,
Right.
and where they can learn about the realities.
This
that they're-
actually is a long tradition. It actually brings it out of the shadows of what used to be done. When I was growing up, if there was a girl who got in trouble, then they might be spirited away to an aunt in another state and live there for a while. And that's essentially what you guys did. You were helping to raise somebody, right, and bring that young lady through her pregnancy. In your family, David. So this helps to. I mean, these centers were born out of that tradition.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But now it's exciting to see it grow into this whole family idea, and dealing with people and families, helping fathers become the best that fathers they can be. And,
That's exactly right.
And dealing also too with the guilt that many people have felt for decisions that they made maybe decades ago.
Well, and that's another huge area that we've developed into, that we've seen the need, and we've had women come in who have made decisions that they regret now, and concerning their unborn children and abortion. And so we have a program, a recovery program for those who are dealing with this. It doesn't go away. And so they are being able to bring some hope and healing into their lives as well. So it's in the 30 years, it's amazing how we had no idea 30 years ago.
That's right.
That it was going to be anything like this. We just had a very narrow vision, and God has added on all of these aspects to it. So yeah. And but it's volunteer based.
Right.
And that's the way we run it.
And it's an opportunity in 247-2273.
Correct.
Is the number if people want to call over to the Pregnancy Care Center, the Coastal Pregnancy Care Center, and offer to be a champion.
Absolutely.
And when we come back, though, we want to look at one of the challenges that is one of the roadblocks that's put up before a number of pregnancy centers in California, and we're concerned about copycat laws that could be elsewhere too. So that's when we come back in a moment on Faith Matters on the Talk Station. Welcome back to Faith Matters here on the Talk Station, FM 107 and AM 1240. And I'm Ben Ball, along with Reverend Mark Woods and Reverend Robert Cornegie. And our special guest, David Wilkinson, is also with us today. And I want to bring up an article that is out of California. It came out about a month ago or less. It's from Ricochet is the name of the website, but it's been in the news quite a bit. It's called, their phrase is unconstitutional. California law forces pregnancy centers to promote abortion. Imagine a state law that forced Weight Watchers to direct its health-conscious clients to locations where they could be sold piles of discount bacon. This analogy is great, really, for this. It's it says, delicious as baconalia sounds to me, and maybe you, what kind of government would threaten a weight loss center for merely not promoting the very thing, weight gain, it was trying to prevent? For not promoting it. Well, such a state government did pass such a law. And Alliance Defending Freedom is in federal court challenging it. ADF filed a complaint in federal court in October of 2015 against the state of California for passing an unconstitutional law that forces pro-life pregnancy centers to promote abortion. The state law requires licensed medical centers that offer free pro-life help to pregnant women to direct their patients and clients to state programs that offer free or discounted abortions. The pro-life centers, under the law, even have to give out the phone numbers for the abortion program. This is being challenged under free speech rights. But David, this is an obstacle that you've been around the country with different centers, and they're all facing some similar kinds of obstacles and resistance to their work.
This is a challenge when you have a government which is not spending millions, but at times billions over the last 10, 15, 20 years into Planned Parenthood, which goes directly against what many people believe to be sinful and wrong. Mm-hmm. And now to force companies, because that's what they're doing, they're forcing nonprofit organizations to fall in line with what they believe in, and a liberal perspective all the way on that side. Is not just taping their mouths shut, but is actually forcing them to do the very thing that they're trying to go against. So for me, it's no longer a judicial issue; it's a moral issue. This is an ethical, heart, emotional, spiritual decision, And for a government to tell a nonprofit this is what you can and cannot do, that's directly against your bylaws, what's it going? What is the turmoil that's going to cause in the churches if the churches don't get behind this, and if they don't stand up on behalf of the pregnancy centers? What's going to happen is the government will eventually say, by the way, you need to also tell the churches that they have to start teaching these things, or they can't teach these things about the Bible. So this is a real slippery slope once the government has the right to tell a nonprofit what they can and cannot do. It's going to go very quickly into the churches.
Mark?
Yeah, well, I think they already tell us what to do. You can't. I get an email from our conference every year around election time saying, Mark, don't put signs outside your church that say whatever candidate it is, because United Methodism will lose its tax whatever. Also, I can't marry people who do not have a North Carolina state license. So I think that's already the case. What I find interesting about this article is they want to argue that free speech is where, is what's being violated here, right? Is that correct? Did I read this correctly?
That's the federal argument, yes.
Yeah, and it would be religious liberty is probably a better way to put it.
This is what's fascinating about this is those who are on the pro-choice side talk about liberty, freedom to choose, and those who are on the pro-life side are talking about freedom to choose not to do that, right? And so it's almost like they're kind of they're opposites, and yet they're using the same arguments to kind of get different results. I think that David, to suggest that it's a moral issue, I think I would agree in the sense that this is not a political issue for us Christians. This is a theological issue. And so the argument from theology probably would, at least in this article, would work a little bit better than an argument from free speech, because I think they're saying the same thing. Pro-choice is saying, have the freedom to choose. Pro-life is saying, have the freedom to choose. Just choose life, right? Or choose to come to a pregnancy center, or choose to come to Planned Parenthood, and not have to. So I just find that really interesting that they're sort of on the same side and yet trying to get different results.
Yeah, same tactics, different results. The fact is, pregnancy centers are 501c3 religious organizations. They are not secular organizations, and so you have a state regulatory approach to limiting what this religious organization can do, and this is where that article keeps saying they're referring to, and that's where the ADF is coming from. In the attack on this is because it really is. There's another
side to this as well too, because these organizations, as like the Coastal Pregnancy Care Center, has statements of faith. And they look for their people to sign these statements of faith, and this kind of thing, David, is in violation of that. Is in violation of what they expressly believe. But every state, though, states are vary about what they want these various pregnancy centers to say or to do as well. So here, this is they fight to be able to hire people who are of like mind, yet they get the roadblock in the way is, oh, wait a minute, you got to be open to employing people who are not of like mind, yet you're like-minded in your mission. So how does that work? I mean, how do you not do that?
Well, look, ADF has fought this in other states. This isn't their first rodeo on this issue. This has come up in New York and in Maryland, and they've been successful in fighting this back. And so the judges and in fact, many of the what would be known as the liberal side, the progressive side of the media as well as the legal side have agreed with this, that this is overstepping their authority. This is beyond their authority.
And most of these things are economic issues, right? I mean, let's just be honest here. A lot of times this is about 501c3, right?
Yeah.
That's
about tax exempt status, etc.
That's exactly.
That's right. I mean, this is an economic issue on both sides. I mean, I think that as a pastor, I'm going to talk about it theologically, morally. But I mean, when you're arguing these kinds of things, I think this is an economic issue. I mean, it's
now. Remember, we had the story of the professor and Doc Loomis, who's not with us, was connected or knew that college. Was it Wheaton? It was a college where the professor had professed some alignment with Islam and some of its beliefs, but she had signed a statement of faith. And it was from that. Is her articles of faith that she agreed to? Is that they put their basis of their suspension on? And this would counter that whole idea that you could do that.
Yeah, exactly.
Is that a modern day sort of diet of worms on some level? Recant or you will be taken.
It is.
Compelled, I cannot do it.
I would love that kind of thing.
Yeah,
that's the way you couched it. That kind of narrative.
It's kind of.
I've been studying church
too.
history, so this is going to be what I say.
I haven't read the statute or whatever it is, the regulation on this, but I do wonder if they have the reciprocal. In that as well, that the pregnancy centers,
the abortion centers,
promote the abortion centers have to promote the pregnancy centers as well and give phone numbers. I don't think that was in the deal.
Yet you certainly have had laws that have passed or tried to be passed where the abortion centers would have to explain a sonogram, for example, and they've argued that on free speech rights too.
Mm-hmm.
Let me. I'm going to get in trouble here. I know I am. But let me.
Welcome back, Mark.
Yeah, let me try to argue from the other side here. What if the point is not to promote the abortion center and to promote abortions, but to promote something else like, what's the word? Come on now. Safe sex, right?
Okay.
These kinds of things. Because I know these Planned Parenthood places are not just promoting just abortion. It's not the only thing that they do. I mean, they provide, comfort to women in other situations and that. So perhaps, and I know this, perhaps you have one side saying, work with us, right? You have Planned Parenthood, the government saying, work with us. And you have the other side saying, we can't work with you because of this one avenue that you work. I mean, you could definitely argue, and I'm arguing the other side. Remember, you could definitely see how that would be. It would look kind of weird for one side to say, look, we can provide things that you all can't, and you provide things that we can't, so let's work together here. But then you have this statement of faith who, once again, probably would say, well, we're not allowed to work with you on some respect.
Yeah. And that would be that's why it switches to the moral, from the theological moral side of it. There are some limitations that we are bound by by our faith, and the sanctity of human life is the big one on that one. So anything that would infringe on that is something that would be difficult to work through. It would take some interesting negotiations to do that. Yeah, for the two to coexist, we all want to coexist, right? Well, they're just things that don't coexist.
Yeah. Well, Robert's bumper sticker says contradict.
That's right.
That's right.
I don't think he wants to coexist. I'd agree with that, though.
No. But again, with the pregnancy care centers like this one in California and the ones that we support here as well, the whole idea is about giving life a chance. Right? So it's about giving life a chance, no matter if it's the infant, the mother, the father, the family. Let's see, isn't this what God intended for life to be? Is a chance. And so we're again discussing that. Coming back in just a moment, we'll have some other subjects we'll be bantering about as well here on Faith Matters on the Talk Station, FM 107 and AM 1240. Welcome back to Faith Matters here on the Talk Station, FM 107 and AM 1240. And thanks for joining us here today. And I'm Ben Ball. Special guest is David Wilkinson is with us here today. Also, we have Reverend Mark Woods and Reverend Robert Cornegie. And as we talk about matters of faith and different things that are going on in our lives, The question at this time is actually about death. The book is called The Good Death, an exploration of dying in America by Ann Newman, and a review in Religion News Service written by Kimberly Winston talking about it. And she actually had a lot of quotes from the book itself, so we're going to deal with mainly with those. And one quote here is, "The laws, medical practices, and corporate regulations that surround death and dying continue to be strongly influenced by religion, whether it's in the delivery of health care through Catholic hospitals, whether it's in the rituals of medical practices infused with, or whether it's simply the language that we find acceptable around the dying. If the good death is anything, it's a call for people to examine their own wishes around end-of-life issues and decide what role religion, either theirs or that of their caregivers, will play. Religion, she holds, influences the ideas of quality of life and how far we are willing to go to preserve it." She says that's like it's a bad thing. Robert, what's your reaction to this story?
Well, you can kind of get the tone where she's coming from. And look, if as a pastor and someone who, just as we were talking before we came on this segment, the whole concept of death is very near and dear to the church, and that because we serve a risen Savior who has tasted death on our behalf. And so we're very very familiar with this idea, and she has had some experiences that are played out in her article in the article in the book about the difficult stages of death, and so it's coming from her. This is her perspective on it. So,
and an interesting perspective, raised a Mennonite and then converted to Catholicism.
Right,
so
exactly.
Again, makes for an interesting perspective. Mark, and again in the break we were talking about how this is what we talk about in Christianity.
No, I would say one of the things that Christianity trains us in is how to die. I mean, that's part of our training. That's what we're forming people into. That's why one of our central act is Holy Communion. The body of Christ, the blood of Christ. You ingest that, and we hope that you are what you eat, right? That you become like Jesus. And Jesus is constantly talking about if you're going to follow me, you're going to take up your cross, you're going to die. So death plays a real role, the way Robert said. And I don't think it ever should not be a question for us, or at least a conversation on how is one to die. How do we a good death, if you will, or at the beginning of this article, a good enough death. I think the only thing that in the article that I would really give pause for concern would be the kind of individualistic tone that the article took, that it is up to the wishes of the person. Like they get to make their own decisions. Every time I get to make my own decision, I always make the wrong one for some reason. But it is more along the lines of a Christian community working together. Now, the argument was too that sometimes those religious institutions, us Christianities, we get it wrong, and we actually cause more suffering. No doubt. I think that's the case. But
we don't always say the right thing.
We do not. And sometimes, and I've been in that situation. I've been standing in the waiting room of the ICU, and someone has said, "Pastor, what do we do?" And everything inside me is saying, "Just turn around and go get in your car." No, but I mean, and you have to deal with that. You have to go through that conversation about life and quality and these kinds of issues. And it should never be. And the reason I say it's a little individualistic is because I don't ever think that our deaths are our own decisions in any way. I just don't think that should be the case. I think we can plan, and I think that that's a good thing that the article says. Plan, talk about it. Make sure you talk about DNRs and all of these other things when it comes to But when it comes down to it, for me, I want, when I pass away, for my wife to have conversations with her minister and with the community of Christ. Because death is not just that moment in which we die. It is the meals and the funerals and the services of life and death and resurrection. It is the committal. It is all of that.
Memorialize.
It's the memorial. It is the year later.
Correct.
When the widow comes up for communion, and it's that day that her husband passed away. That is part of the church's job. It's not just about the individual's moment of, what should I do in this moment?
Yeah.
It's the whole care. I mean, and churches pride themselves on this. We always talk about this. We care from conception to death, and even, I would suggest, even after death we're caring. You know what I mean?
David, again, David Wilkinson is here. He was a keynote speaker for the Coastal Pregnancy Care Center's banquet this week. And David, you work with centers around, and this is really the subject, because this is about people making individual decisions, as Mark was saying, and often not making the correct one or not making informed ones, and that our life begins and our life ends in community with others, right?
I'm
Right?
sorry, David. I like that. Because we don't choose to be born, right?
Right.
It's not my individual choice.
It's in
right?
communion with something, right?
So you
Someone.
may even be able to say that the church really doesn't do from conception to life, to death, or even after, but we're forming parents as well. Like, we want parents, even before they're parents, to be formed. But I'm sorry to interrupt, but I really like that, man. That's...
Well, David, you see that. That it's all about this life and death struggle is all about what these centers are about too.
Yeah, but I want to take the conversation maybe to a little bit different level. Mm-hmm. I was thinking as Mark was talking about how a person's perspective on death as a child formulates the amount of fear that they have about their own physical death or those around them. Mm-hmm. I grew up on a farm, and we had lots of different animals, and animals that were both pets and animals that were just animals. Mm-hmm. But I remember as I was growing up, we had a death of a bunny, we had a death of a dog, we had a death of a duck. We've had deaths of all kinds of animals, and I remember how traumatic that was as a child. And I remember our whole family, my dad, my mom, my sister, myself, all crying over one of the ducks that was killed by dogs, and how traumatic that was. And I remember that as we buried it together, and the grief that we went through and the process, and then we prayed and thanked God for allowing us to have the year and a half that we had with the duck. Mm-hmm. And it actually turned out to be a very beautiful experience where I saw that death was a part of God's process. And eventually I lost the fear of what death can do to you, because I saw actually out of the death came life. So what I want to say to this is many times people are so afraid of the natural process of the dying process that God has, including sometimes the death of a marriage, the death of a child, the death of a business, the death of a nation, that they come to fear that so much that when it's time for maybe their own spouse to die, or their own child to die, or their own parents to die, or maybe them to die, because they haven't been raised in a culture that trains that death is a natural progress and process that God takes every person in, that really, the word says that unless a grain of wheat falls into the ground and dies, it remains alone. But if it dies, it produces much fruit. That some of the greatest births, some of the greatest movements of God I've ever seen was out of some of the most traumatic deaths I've ever experienced. And that's where I think people need to get to. That it's not, if you don't believe in Christ, your death is a true death. Mm-hmm. But when you believe in a Savior, your death is just the passageway, the light to heaven, and that gives you great hope. And therefore, yes, there is sorrow in the moment, but there's joy in the morning, because you know that person you're going to see again. Mm-hmm. And that's a whole different perspective than, well, death is just it and it's a religious thing. Now it becomes a whole nother passage.
I heard someone say that they heard from a funeral, and I wrote it down, is that it's not the light going out, it's the lamps turned off because the sun has risen.
That's very good.
Wow.
Well, you were talking about that earlier, Ben, about one of your congregants that's going through a process,
yes.
and the remarkable way her faith has prepared her for this passage that's coming up, and her understanding. Paul talked about it. The three things that remain: faith, hope, and love, and that love is the one that endures, because our faith is based upon, our hope is based upon the love of God for us.
Well,
and if we don't understand His love for us, then that whole faith and hope thing gets a little shaky. And that's where that dimension is taking place, in that faith and hope thing. And she actually talks about that sometimes hope can be bad. And it's a fascinating approach to what really true hope is about.
Right.
Look, we have hope in a lot of things.
Right.
And if we put our hope in the wrong thing, we find out real quickly that's not the kind of hope we want to have. We want to have that eternal hope.
Well, we've mentioned Joey Feek, Joey and Rory, the country duet. And
Right.
Joey Feek has been dying of cervical cancer now for several months, and her husband's been writing this blog.
She has passed.
and she passed away since we did the last show. So, but we've talked on several occasions about what an expression of love they've had an opportunity to have between them as a couple, and what a great example they have been of a good death, of this being accepted. And she's far too young and has a 2-year-old, and all of these things that we would say, why God, why?
Yeah.
But yet they have praised God through every moment of this.
Yeah.
And that's recognizing, as you were saying, David, that year and a half that they had. You recognize the 40 years that you had here. You recognize the 85 years or the 2 years.
That's right.
So that there are still praises to be made, even as this lamp has turned out and we've watched the sun rise on a new beginning.
Yeah.
More on Faith Matters coming up in a moment here on Coastal Daybreak. On Faith Matters, I'm getting my shows mixed up, here on the talk station FM 107 and AM 1240. We'll be back in a moment. And welcome back to Faith Matters here on the talk station FM 107 and AM 1240. And thanks for joining us here today. I'm Ben Ball, along with Reverend Robert Cornegie, Reverend Mark Woods, and our special guest is David Wilkinson, who has been here as the keynote speaker for the Coastal Pregnancy Care Center banquet. And David, I think this next article might be down your line, since you do a lot of fundraising for a lot of good groups. The church collection plate goes digital. There really is an app for everything. This is from Bloomberg Business Week. Rebecca Greenfield writing about and she just gives an example about a service that has the typical music and other things that happen as a service, but then there's an opportunity to give, and the attendant goes online to tithe.ly app, and it takes fewer than 5 taps, and built-in geolocation means that he can contribute at any of 1,000 churches that subscribe. A feature that's especially useful around holidays like Easter when many people are traveling, and so automatically it knows what church he's in and how to make that donation. I have seen, in fact, Kim Commando was talking about that on the same day that we're recording, was talking about a number of churches that are using it and a variety of different apps that are available for that, and it's all about making giving easy. We'll talk about that too in just a moment. But David, I know you involved in fundraisers where people are probably doing some of these things all the time.
Yes, that's exactly right. I was thinking, as we were discussing this before this recording, we've got really, at this point, 3 generations on the earth. You got the boomers, you got the Gen Xers, you got the millennials, and the next generation coming along. But I was trying to think about outside the box about the heart in this, because this is about a methodology. Mm-hmm. And when I think about when Christ was standing in the temple and he was watching all of the religious people come up and putting all of their loud coins into the box, and then all of a sudden this woman comes along and puts her little tiny mite in there. Plunks in there. This for me is the same issue. Mm-hmm. It's whether or not you have an app, or whether or not you write a check, or whether or not you put a $1 bill in the collection plate is not the issue. The issue that supersedes all of this is a heart issue. Mm-hmm. So when we talk about whether or not this is, should we have an app to our church? Should we have a credit card machine that we pass? Should we have an ATM machine out in the lobby? Mm-hmm. Should you write checks? All these things are really important and we should discuss them. But the bottom line under everything else is it's a spiritual issue. Has God touched your heart with your finances about giving? Mm-hmm. So if that hasn't been touched, I tell you what, you can have the easiest app, you can have the easiest way to give, but you're not going to give anyway. Because until God has really revived your heart, and really when you're so thankful and appreciative of what God has done for you, it's about the excess of what He's given you. What are you giving back to Him? But we've got to talk about these ways because they're just as important as your heart. Because if it's difficult to give, you're going to find your heart might be in the right place, but if you can't find a way to do it easily,
that's right,
you won't do it. And that's what I think we really need to discuss as well.
Now, this article says churches using tithing apps report they see more donations more often from more people. Subscribing establishments either pay a monthly fee or allow the app to collect a cut of each gift. Tithe.ly lets donators cover this. PushPay promises churches a 5% spike in donations or their money back. But getting parishes with pastors and members older than 40 to sign on has been more Job-like, they say. Tradition is hard to overcome. But there's a line, I'm not seeing it right off the bat. Oh, here it is now. It says, regardless of which app a congregation chooses, Mark, the point is convenience. We call it frictionless giving. Don't you love that, Mark? And don't you have PayPal there and Cherry Point United Methodist?
It's hard. I think David's right. I mean, tithing, however you're giving, is a spiritual act of worship. It's what we do. We worship in this way. But form, for me, form and content matter. You can't just say, we'll change the form and the content won't matter. The content oftentimes is shaped by the form. Mm-hmm. And I'm a Methodist, all right? And so Methodism errs always on the side of pragmatism, meaning we don't really care what it means as long as it works, right? And to me, I mean, every inch of my body cringes at that kind of pragmatism because I'm not really, I want to know what it means before I care if it works or not, right? I want the table cleaned and to think about things before we do this. And the fact that the companies take a cut of someone's tithe so that they can make it easier, I mean, philosophically, it really causes me a problem here. Not to mention economically, because I haven't been here in a while, and this is the last session, so I might as well try to rile Robert up a little bit. But Christianity, to me, is the last remaining bastion against an unfettered kind of capitalism. It is the last
you got the keywords in there, Robert.
To sort of say, no, it is not about the bottom line. It is not about that. And so I would hesitate at the way in which this means is being presented. Does that make sense? I'm not going to say, nope. Sorry, everybody's got to write checks and everybody's got to throw in cash, right? I'm not going to say that. But I am going to say we've got to think about the means instead of just marking the bottom line is more money and frictionless, right? I mean, that to me doesn't say gospel in any way, right?
Wow.
Right.
But
Doesn't
giving
sound worshipful.
It doesn't sound worshipful. But I think David is correct. I think that we've got to start with why we're giving, those kinds of questions before we move into this kind of pragmatic use of technology.
Well, look, our churches have inched their way into technology in some fashion or another, like having video screens in the sanctuary, and then you put the song lyrics and the hymns up there, or having the scriptures out there as well too, and or any Facebook page and websites and blogs and all these other things too. So is this just inevitable, Robert, that we do this?
We have a generation that's growing up in a cashless world,
right?
I mean, and one of the wailings that's going on in the American church, at least, is this problem we're having with the millennials not being interested in coming because they can't relate to the culture that we're doing. Now, this is self-inflicted. And I agree with Mike, forgot his name, Mark.
Welcome back.
That I think one of the things I really respect about his connection to the development of the church and all the different things that we've gone through. And so we're seeing a modernization that is counterculture to what we are accustomed to, having grown up in the world that we've grown up in. And these, and so that's kind of where this article goes. It's kind of pitching the two against each other. The old ways of doing it, you just drop it in the collection plate, and if you don't have something to put in the collection plate, you feel guilty. So now those that are doing it direct mail or however they're doing it, they get a little piece of paper that says "I gave online" that they can drop into the collection plate. Yeah. So this is this dilemma we're in. But look, and it's true, the millennials have a whole different concept of using money than we do.
I've been waiting for a long time for the brass plate with a card swipe on it.
Yeah,
so I figure that's going to be coming at some point in time.
Yeah, well, that's right. A lot of people have already gone away from cash.
Yeah,
I'm old school. I like cash. Cash is king.
But for years, people have had accounts drafted. I mean, they've had that in a lot of places. The thing I mostly object to is where it may accept credit cards. I think that's going to be to me that's also a moral issue.
It's the IOU.
Yes, the IOU of giving.
Well, there's some liberty in dealing with cash too.
Yeah.
Because if you're doing it digitally, there are a lot of people that know what's going on in your little digital world. Your bank knows, and the bank gives reports, and everybody's aware of that. And the nice thing about cash is that that's.
Oh, you mean the under the reported thing? Right?
Oh man,
I'm not going to say that. I'm just going to say untraceable donations, which I really like that idea.
Okay, now remember this segment is.
We used to use that phrase in college. How much untraceable do you have?
Yeah.
I got about $60. It's untraceable.
Just remember, Robert, this is going to be on YouTube and Facebook.
Oh,
that's true.
That was Robert Coney.
I want to bring up one other point though about this is that especially on the millennial side, they're so used to doing everything, like you said, cashless. They're extremely modern. They have everything that's all wireless. And I think many times when they walk into the back of a church, the question they're going to ask is God modern enough for me?
Yeah.
So if they walk in and they see offering plates passed around instead of credit card swipers, and you can't give online, and you don't have an app to your church, the question, I don't think they're going to ask this out loud or even think it, but subconsciously, I wonder if they're going to actually one day wake up and say, you know what, the last place that I would go to is the church because they don't seem to have it together in the modern age. And if the church is not on the cutting edge, on the modern side where they actually can be pragmatic, does God can he even understand what I'm going through when I'm having problems as a programmer? When I'm having problems with things that are complex because the church is so simple. Maybe God is too simple for my complex problems.
And with that, David, you get the last word today. David Wilkinson joining us as a special guest here on Faith Matters on the Talk Station, FM 107 and AM 1240. Hope you'll join us again next week.
Thank you for joining us for Faith Matters. Email your comments, questions, and suggestions to faithmatters@thetalkstation.com.
Give me faith, trust what you say, that you're good and your love is great. I'm broken inside, I give you my life. Give me faith.
Faith Matters is a production of The Talk Station.